Hey folks, welcome ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dudes and dudettes. Welcome to another Wednesday live Q&A. Another week already. Let me just turn the volume off on my iPad. I'm hearing myself back. No one needs that. Right, I think we're all ready to go. As you'll probably tell straight away, this is going to be a good live Q&A once again. I've got some cool gear to show you as usual. Let me first lay out the ground rules. If you're new here and you haven't seen one of these before, every Wednesday I basically sit down with a lot of you fine people and just answer as many of your questions as I can. And I also want to use this opportunity to show you a few bits of gear from around the shop that I've seen throughout the course of the week and thought, that's very cool, let me throw a little bit more focus on that. So, as you'd probably tell from some swirly sounds there, I've got a few pedals I want to talk about today. I've just got the one guitar, and what a guitar this is. I'm going to get onto this in a little bit. Many of you will probably have seen Jeff make his debut on YouTube and unbox a bunch of PRS guitars last week, end of last week, I think it was. There were some really, really nice things, and I've only just got the chance today to come and see them and play a few of them, and you know, expectations were high and they were met. As I'm sure most people know, 2020 PRS guitars, there's not a whole lot to say about them. They are on top form, in very, very fine form, with guitars like this, the Modern Eagle. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on in the video. What I'm going to do instead is use it as a vehicle to try and cover as much ground as possible, because to me this is kind of the most versatile electric guitar in terms of what its construction and electronic capability allow it to do. This is probably the most versatile electric guitar that we've got in stock. That's not to say type of guitar. You know, I would always say a Tele or a 335 is arguably just as versatile, but the sheer number of options that I'm going to delve into on this guitar a little bit later kind of earn this the title of most versatile. So hopefully you see what I mean by that. So I'm going to use this as a vehicle to answer as many of your questions as possible, and also to show the pedals I've got on the floor, which by the way I kind of picked almost at random. They're three pedals I've never used before, so I thought it would be fun to sit here on YouTube and in a live capacity and walk through my initial thoughts on them. And they're pretty good so far. So, as always, chime in the live chat with your questions. I can see a few coming in already. Thanks to everyone for joining so far. It's going to be a good one. So what I'm going to do, I think, is have a bit more of a play with this guitar, just explore some of the sounds. I'm just going to turn off all the pedals, go straight into the amp, which by the way is a Morgan JS12 today. I've used this in a live Q&A before. It was very well received, it did a great job, and as I say, I want to kind of have a nice benchmark here of tone so that the pedals kind of sound their best and this guitar can sound at best. So that's why I've got the Morgan. Here's what it sounds like with no effects, just reverb from the amp. So that's a nice warm neck pickup. Let me just tilt this down a little bit so you can see the guitar a bit better, hopefully. How's that? Yeah, that's better. Okay, so you can see what I've got going on with the switches and stuff now, hopefully. Okay, let's just talk about this sound for a little bit. Every time I play a PRS guitar at the moment, they just seem to be getting better and better. It doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't matter if it's a custom 24, a 594, you know, any of the McCarthy's, or indeed these guitars. they just have a tone, and it's helped dispel the myth, because growing up as a guitar player, it's always about Fender and Gibson, and I'm sure for a lot of guitar players it still is about Fender and Gibson predominantly, and PRS are kind of like a brand that was neither here nor there for a lot of people. And I think with the guitars that they're putting out now, they've really got their own sound. They've really perfected it, and what it is, it's unfair to say that it's a perfect blend of Fender and Gibson properties, because that's too easy. What this is something different, very, very different, and this Modern Eagle particularly just has this real distinct tone. It sounds like nothing else, and I notice it when I play on the G and B strings a lot. So that's something. That's the middle position, which now this is going to be a test here, because I did do a listing video previously of one of these guitars and talked through the whole wiring setup, because it's so complicated, and I wanted to make sure whoever watched that video would understand and could follow along as I was doing what I was doing, and subsequently I've forgotten everything that I said. So there's a 5-way switch, there's a push-pull here, there's 2 mini toggles for coil splits, and there's another little switch here for the value of the pot. Very interesting. So lots of stuff going on. I've got to try and remember what it is. So that was the middle position, which sounds to me, I think that's the middle pickup by itself. This I can't remember. But basically, what this is, you can find out on the website, you can find out in the video that I originally did for this guitar to find out what all the wiring does. Wherever it's set though, it just sounds great, and anyone who's watched our videos before will know that I was a huge fan of the PRS semi-hollow special semi-hollow, which was basically a custom 22 with a narrow field pickup in the middle. And I always talked about that guitar as being one of the best semi-hollow instruments I'd ever played, and in those in-between positions it would do all those got that real kind of articulate, clean voicing. And I think Willie M415 has pointed out in the comments that it's very Jerry Garcia-esque, and you're dead right. And I guess the reason for that is that this model was closely developed with John Mayer for his Super Eagle guitar a few years ago. Now that he's in Dead & Company, fulfilling that role essentially, a lot of those tones, I just love it so much. It's so happy. It just brings joy. It literally just brings joy. So that's why I'm playing this guitar anyway. I said I'd talk about it a bit later on. Let's mix things up and I'll answer a few questions, because I think quite a few have come in already, and I have a tendency of talking too much and missing a bunch of questions and then having to answer a bunch very quickly. So hopefully I'm going to be more on it. with the questions today. Right. Okay, greetings from Malaysia. What is the best body and neck wood combination on a custom PRS? It very much depends what you're going for. I really like the typical custom 24, which I think is mahogany body and neck with a maple top. Seems to work very, very well. Though actually on the recent Wood Library guitars that we saw that had roasted maple neck with a Ziricotti fingerboard, I think it had a different bodywood. That was really nice, and that really accentuated everything I was just talking about the PRS voice of being bright and articulate and clear. Those Wood Library guitars really had that. This has it too. I'm not entirely sure what the wood combination on this is. Let me just find that, because I've got the website right here. What does it say? Mahogany neck on this guitar with a rosewood fingerboard, mahogany body. Okay, so pretty much, in line with a custom 24. That's what I talked about before. Makes sense now why I like it. I think mahogany just works really well for their guitars. Obviously the maple top, which not only looks beautiful and accentuates the finishes, but it pushes out the high frequencies really nicely, like so. Do you know what else? I think the reason I like these so much is that they're really dynamic, but the tone stays intact. You don't have to play these very hard to get that really nice sweet treble. Whereas some other brands of guitars, you have to fight for that a little bit. And I've always liked brighter sounding guitars. So despite this being a mahogany body and mahogany neck, which you'd normally think would be a little bit muddy maybe, this has just got an abundance of clarity. I'm picking really soft. And what that does is it gives you more control over the tone of the guitar using the guitar's controls. So if I turn the tone down, as opposed to all the way up, makes a huge difference. It's a very linear kind of operation playing a PRS guitar. I kind of deviated from your question there, but yeah, I like the standard mahogany, mahogany and mahogany. There we go. Okay, McNasty. I really love the neck profile of a 58 Les Paul, and I'm curious how a PRS McCarty 594 neck compares. So am I. I love the 58 Les Paul neck profile. The McCarty, being the pattern vintage, is more like a 59, so it's a little slimmer. This guitar actually feels pretty much the same. This is the pattern regular, I believe. The vintage is a little bit more asymmetrical, so on the 594 it feels more sort of hand rolled and uneven, which is what the great old Gibsons had. So they're closer to a 59, they're not as chunky as a 58. So if you like that real baseball bat thing, a guitar like this actually feels a little bit rounder, feels more like a 58, whereas the pattern vintage on the 594 feels more like a Les Paul 59, if that makes sense. But it's very, very small difference, not much in it at all. They're both really comfortable neck profiles. I like them both. Just going to turn off the fan because it's not only quite noisy, but it's very cold all of a sudden. I was boiling hot and now it's started and I'm not. Okay. Right, Michael MC says, enjoyed your video on Super Strats under 1200 pounds. Would you say high-end models like this one are 5% better or significantly better? Well, it's an interesting question because last week I was playing a couple of Fender American Original guitars for the course of the whole video and absolutely loved them. Talked pretty much endlessly about their merits, and someone actually asked about Squire as well, like, can you enjoy a Squire being so used to this level of high-end guitar? And I made the case for Squire. I think that any guitar, assuming it's been set up correctly and has, works as efficiently as it's designed to, you learn to adapt to that instrument's capabilities, and really, once you adapt to an instrument, you sort of fuse with it and you get the best out of it. But what happened at the end of the last video was I went up, in the last couple of minutes, I picked up a custom shop Strat in here. And after playing those American original guitars, which are fantastic guitars, I noticed a big difference going to the custom shop. Now it can't just be that it sounds different, because the pickups, are quite similar in terms of the pickups that they put in their production guitars to their custom shop guitars. They're not miles apart. I think it comes down to the feel, and that's very hard to quantify. It's just something that I guess it's whatever you're used to more. I have the great fortune of playing all kinds of high-end caliber of guitars most of the time, which means that my ears and my hands naturally gravitate to that quote-unquote feel, that experience. So, it's hard to say if it's 5%, because if I really think about it, they're very different instruments, and I don't quite know why. But I'm sure anyone who's played custom shop level guitars or this core level PRS guitars, it doesn't discredit those regular production guitars in any way, but there's something different about these. I guess it's the attention to the details that go into these handcrafted sort of higher end models. I think it's a big difference, but I can see why people who don't have that much experience playing this kind of level of guitar might think that the differences are less. And if you feel that way, that's amazing, because you're going to be really happy playing a guitar that doesn't cost 4 times as much. And that's brilliant. But once you've been bit by that bug and you appreciate the differences, whether you can articulate them or not, as long as you can understand the differences, they plague you for the rest of your life. So if you're still asking that question, get out now and consider it, a 5% difference, and just stick with what you know and love, because you can buy a lot of great guitars that don't cost the earth. Long answer, but hopefully that made a bit of sense. But on the subject of your question about the video we did on the saloon guitars, as we call them, it seemed that a lot of you really liked that. So we'll be doing more of that kind of thing, taking guitars from the saloon, which for those who don't know, who haven't been to the store, is where all of our production line guitars live. So USA Fenders, USA Gibsons, so on and so forth, Ibanez, Charvel, whatever else it might be, they all live out there. And it seemed that the reception we got for featuring some more of that kind of level of guitar was great, and I really enjoyed doing that, so we'll be doing more of that in the future. Okay. Okay, this is a good username. Zofo2112, Zofo2112. I don't know if you intended to type that twice, but that's what we got. Which guitar did you prefer that you played recently out of the Nick Huber Semi-Hollow and the Tom Murphy Les Paul? Yeah, that's a good question. The Tom Murphy Les Paul made me seriously consider selling my Les Paul. Well, I say seriously consider. It crossed my mind. That didn't happen with the Huber. I appreciated what the Huber was and how good it was, and how, as an instrument, how perfectly suited that will be to somebody. And I really enjoyed playing that guitar. I put it on the one of these live Q&As, I used that guitar and it was great. But that Tom Murphy Les Paul did make me stupidly think, what can I do? Because this is the best caliber of Les Paul, custom shop Les Paul I've ever played. So I've got to give it to that. And someone, I believe, has purchased it and will be very happy with that purchase, as the person who purchased the Huber will be very happy with their purchase as well. They're both absolutely stellar instruments, but I've got to give it to that Tom Murphy because it literally stopped me in my tracks and You can tell, I think, in the video I did for it, I was very careful with my choice of words and choice of notes that I played on it to make it really come across as best as I possibly could. I was really feeling that guitar. So yeah, good question. I've got to give it to the Murphy. Herbert Roxas, what do you think of the Marshall JVM 205 combo? JVM is a fantastic it's a fantastic Marshall amp. 205, I think, is that the 50 or the 100 watt? Either way, the JVM is great. In terms of modern Marshall amplifiers, it's literally like a greatest hits. So any kind of Marshall tone you want to get from it, it can deliver, and it's very practical. It's very well thought out. And I honestly think, I've talked about this in previous videos, the people who want the Marshall tone, I don't understand why you wouldn't buy a Marshall. And that's very easy to sit here and say, but there's amazing amps on the market, you know, Friedman, Dr. Z, so many amps that we sell that are inspired by the Marshall designs with that brand's particular refinements and changes. But the Marshall sound to me is more raw and aggressive than a lot of those boutique counterparts. And the JVM captures that very well. If anyone's seen the recent Metallica Tale of Two Tones videos where I used a Marshall JVM to cop some of the early 80s thrash tones, it pretty much nailed it, and that's because it's got that raw, classic, barky, aggressive, some would argue harsh sound. If you're playing by yourself, it's a pretty bright, aggressive sound, but that's what a Marshall sounds like, and the JVM does it. So I'm a big fan of that amp for that reason. Okay. Vasilis says, Mr. Jack, when will you show us your gear? I do keep teasing stuff on my own channel, which is Jack Griffiths Music. If anyone hasn't seen that and subscribed already, I'd appreciate if you could check that out once this video is over. But I will be making an effort to throw a bit more of my own gear into the limelight on that channel. So yeah, if you haven't checked it out, head over there and you'll be seeing more bits of gear from me very soon. Okay, I'm going to do a couple more questions and then I want to talk about the pedals I've got. So, okay, this isn't a question, this is a very abrupt statement, but I'm going to handle this delicately. James Severin says, PRS is for cork sniffers. So, it's long been the running tagline, unofficially of course, of PRS guitars, that they are reserved for doctors and lawyers and that kind of thing. I think that's pretty tired now, and the way that they've associated themselves with so many artists now and have made such leaps forward in terms of tone and craftsmanship to accommodate players, that's something that some of the other big brands very rarely do. And you know, as I started this video by talking about this guitar, this Modern Eagle, how it carries with it the PRS tone. And they've earned their keep, they've earned their place on the guitar world stage. So, you know, to say that they're for cork sniffers, I see that, and I'm guessing it's pretty tongue-in-cheek what you're saying. But I really think that, considering now as well that you can get S2 level McCarthy guitars, SE guitars, which their SE guitars are fantastic. They're probably the best guitars. This will be a topic for another saloon shootout, I'm sure, but to me they're probably the best guitars sub, what are they now, £800? Certainly some of them. So yeah, I can see why, you know, the appeal of the super wood library mega guitars are not for everybody, but they offer a product that has that DNA in it for every kind of level of instrument and for every kind of player, I think. And they're only taking bigger and bigger steps. So yeah, you know, I'm going to take that with a pinch of salt, but I thought I'd address that because that's just my personal take on PRS guitars. You know, they've grown on me a lot, and I think they've grown on a lot of people out there, just because they are making better and better instruments, and that's what every guitar company should be striving to do, and that's what they're achieving. Okay, Andrew Bates says more freely, Ace Frehley. We'll see. There'll be bits of Frehley dotted in here and there. I am planning at some point to do a bit of an Ace Frehley video on my own channel, as I said, because I love the guy. He's one of my favourite guitar players in the world. And I like throwing in little Frehley-isms to these videos here and there. So, you know, we'll see if anything. If the tone inspires the riff, that's the way it goes. But I'll never try and shoehorn in a weird riff, you know, to an inappropriate tone. So we'll see. Okay. Right. We've got a few more questions coming in, but I want to talk about some cool gear. I've talked a lot about this guitar, and I probably still will as we go. But I've got some pedals on the floor. I've got 3 pedals today, which is more than I usually have, because normally I just sort of have a sound in these videos and I like to show off different guitars, but I'm doing it the opposite way around today. Now, some of you at the start may have heard this sound. Which is a pretty cool sound. It's quite extreme. The reason for that is I picked it up off the shelf and I didn't touch any of the controls. So someone was playing around with this, having a very good experience, we might say. So let me just notch it back a little bit. But I like it. I like what it's doing. Yeah, that's not a great sound, is it? But this is the kind of thing that just requires a bit of tweaking. What this is the Zvex Vibro Phase. And I was excited to play this. I've never played this before. And I think this stemmed from, if anyone knows anything about Zvex, Zachary Vex is a very interesting guy. And he has these really, really clever designs. And I think he made some kind of phase unit with tea lights and candles and all this kind of stuff. And he decided, as that's rather impractical and rather expensive, to make it in a pedal format. And subsequently, he's made this phase pedal that sounds unlike any other traditional phase shifting pedal. You know, it's kind of like a Leslie. And a little bit univibey as well. I mean, those things all kind of tie in together, but I really like it. I think it's a cool little modulation pedal that sounds very different. I mean, I've covered more sort of higher speeds with it. Let's slow it down and see what I can get out of it in a more traditional phasery kind of way. Once again, this is all off the cuff, guys, so you know there's going to be a bit of tweaking here, but let's see what we can pull out of this. It is weird. Let's before I move on, let me just try and get something a little bit more regular phase kind of sound. What this has actually got is a on a control you can vary between the vibrato sound and a phase shifting sound. So I've turned it all the way to vibrato. Ooh, that's nice. This probably isn't going to translate that much through YouTube, but I love that sound, but you can blend in the phaser again. That is a great pedal. It's totally different to anything else. That's why I like Zevex so much. And I'm pleased that we've finally taken the brand on a few weeks ago. They offer something that no other brand does. So you're either going to love that or you're not going to get it at all. I happen to really like it. So that's that. What you also heard earlier on is this, which is pretty weird as well. So let me play a little bit and then I'll talk through what it is. Really nice delay from Old Blood Noise Endeavours, which is another new brand that we've recently taken on. This is the Black Fountain, and I took a total stab on this one. I didn't know what it was. It's a delay, and it's got 3 little settings on it. I'm using the vintage setting, but what I really like is that it's got this fluid control on it, which if I turn it off, sounds like it's adding in the modulation. So if I turn it back in, yeah, you can hear it. Really well done delay. I'll turn the modulation down a bit. Let's go for some longer delay. I'll ramp up the mix a little bit. It's still going. I mean, that is a cool delay. That's just the vintage setting. Let's try, there's one called Organ, which is more of a slap, I think. Really nice delay. There's been a flurry of these these sort of analog delays with a bit of a twist lately. The Underdog series, the pedal series that we've been putting out on YouTube, the delay episode will be coming up next quite soon, featuring a few of those. I kind of wish I'd thrown this one in to the mix of that video. It's a bit of a spoiler alert there, it doesn't feature, but this is a great option. The Black Fountain from Old Blood Noise does some really, really nice stuff. I saw a couple of comments saying that the sound might be clipping a little bit, so let me just turn the amp down slightly. Just had to turn that vibra phase back on because it's super cool. Now I do have another pedal on the floor which I'm also going to talk about in a minute, but in the spirit of balance I want to make sure I'm not missing any questions. So I think I've missed quite a lot, so I'm going to jump back and get to as many as I can. Okay, Henry Herrera, do you find the single coils on this particular guitar a bit noisy? No, I actually don't, because I think PRS have the best split coil options around. So this guitar's got two mini coil splits here, sorry, mini toggle switches here for the coil splits. And when you put them in, so this is the neck pickup, I'm not hearing any extra noise really. What they do is they add coils back to the pickup. So when you go to the split coil sound, it beefs the volume back up, so it compensates. So it sounds like a single coil, but it's a more powerful single coil that sounds closer in output to the humbucker. So let me show you the difference between the two. I'll go humbucking, then I'll go single coil. Not any extra noise particularly. I will play with a little bit of gain later on, but the tonal difference between the humbucker and the single coil works so well. So I love that about PRS. This guitar does it really well. So to answer your question, I don't think they're too noisy. No, I think they're really balanced. Which PRS guitar do you think matches the ES335 tone? That's a really good question. Probably, as you point out, the McCarty hollow body does that because the scale length is a little closer to what a 335 is, and the humbuckers are voiced in that particular way. I mean, this sounds totally different to a 335, despite the fact that there's a lot of similarities on paper. But yeah, I think you're right. The McCarty hollow body guitars, they don't sound the same. Nothing sounds like a 335, but they sound like they're in that lane. So if that's the tone you're going for and you want PRS playability and functionality, then yeah, I'd go for one of the hollow bodies personally. Very good shout yourself. Okay, Thomas Brahm, forgive me. Your favorite guitar right now in the shop? Ooh. If that Tom Murphy was still here, I'd have to say it would be that. That is a good question. I mean, it changes every time I'm here because I get to play new guitars every day. I have to come back to you on that one because that is a good question. There's so many, I can't even begin to remember everything that I've played here, but leave that with me. Leave that with me. James G. Robertson. Hi, Jack. Greetings from the Orkneys. Hello. Welcome. Are Peach getting some more custom 335s in stock like yours? I would imagine so. I don't know exactly what's on order, but the Cherry Red 64 is a very popular model, which is why I knew I had to grab it at the time, but there'll definitely be some others on the way. yeah, I'm not sure about that. Email the sales guys, sales@peachguitars.com. They'll have a better idea than I do of when the next Gibson deliveries are, but they should be pretty soon, I hope. Okay. Can you compare a Masterbuilt or Great Custom Shop Strat versus a Silver Sky? Or are the Masterbuilt guitars on another level? Asks Modern Vintage. Yes, the Masterbuilt guitars are on another level because, in my experience anyway, they sound like old Fenders. And they feel like old Fenders. The PRS Silver Sky takes influence and information from those old guitars, but it doesn't claim to be an old guitar. You could compare it quite nicely to a modern custom shop, but once again, the PRS is just, it's in a different direction, you know, and I'm very keen. I haven't played them yet. The new Maple Neck Silver Skies are finally with us, and I'll be getting my hands on one of those tomorrow. So that'll be an interesting little thing, but I think that they compare to one another in terms of quality, no question. PRS maybe, you know, in terms of consistency, maybe even a little higher, but tonally they're very different. If you've seen the original John Mayer, where I took a Silver Sky and compared it to a John Mayer Signature, an old John Mayer Signature Fender, which was not a custom shop level guitar, but tonally it was quite similar. They sound very different, but the quality is on a parallel. So it'll be interesting. I'm sure a lot of other YouTubers have done that though, compared a custom shop Strat to a Silver Sky, but who knows, maybe we'll get to that. I don't think they personally compare that well. Actually, I'm talking a load of absolute cobblers here. We did a 3 single coil Strat style shootout video, which you can find on YouTube, in which I pitted a Silver Sky against a Fender Custom Shop Strat. So forget everything I've just said for the past 2 minutes, because I've done it, and you can find out the video evidence right here on YouTube. Yeah, forgive me for forgetting that one. Okay, am I catching up here? I think I am catching up. Oh, I see. You asked a follow-up question about, I've had a Silver Sky for 3 months already, but I feel it's missing the Fender Strat snap, twang and vibe that the custom shop and Masterbuilt Strats offer. Have you experienced the same? I guess so, but it's not. To me, it's trying to be something else. It's the PRS sound that I was talking about earlier runs through that guitar more so than the Fender sound does, and it seems silly to say that, being that to look at it, it's very obviously derived from a Fender standpoint. But to me, anyway, you can kind of tell that that guitar had been developed from the ground up. So it kind of lacks a little bit of that stratiness, if you like, but you gain so much of a different character from it that it doesn't really matter. But yeah, if you want a Strat sound, it's not going to sound exactly like a Strat. You know, you've only got to listen to the course of John Mayer's music as an example of how things have changed and how his idea of sound has changed, and that's manifested in the Silver Sky. But I really like it. I wouldn't have it in place of a custom shop Strat, but I'd have it right alongside one. Okay. Let me do a couple more. Actually, I'm going to do 3 more because there's 3 really good questions here. Joe Rosmanassa, superb name, says, PRS versus Nags, what are the similarities and differences? From Slovenia. Hello to you in Slovenia. Okay, so Nags guitars, you could argue, are kind of born out of PRS guitars because Joe Nags was a master builder at PRS and subsequently formed his own guitar company. A lot of his designs are quite inspired by PRS offerings, but they've taken them in a different direction. And I think the tone of a Nags guitar is maybe a little thicker. I'm really generalizing here, but I often think a Nags is a little bit thicker sounding, maybe, dare I say, a little bit more vintage, and the PRS is a little bit more articulate and modern and contemporary. That's just a very short answer to a very good question, but I really, I really appreciate both companies. PRS and Nags both make amazing guitars, and they are quite different. They're not as similar as you might think. Again, I've filmed videos in the past where I've compared the two. so you can check stuff like that out on the channel. But yeah, they've got very different characters. I love what Joe Nags is doing. I think he's more maybe inclined towards vintage gear, or vintage tone anyway. Not to put words in his mouth, but whenever I've played a Nags, it's got that kind of vintage sensibility to it, despite looking like the most pristine, modern, up-to-date guitar that you could possibly imagine. Whereas PRS look modern and quite often sound modern. Real sweeping generalization there. There are exceptions to both of those rules, but that's the way I see them in a general sense. Okay, where are we? Where does the PRS DGT sit for you between Les Pauls and hollow bodies like a 335? That's a good question. The DGT is basically PRS's attempt at creating a hybrid between a Gibson and a Fender, is how I understand it. You know, it's one of their earliest signature models that they ever did for David Grissom. So it's basically like a Les Paul. It sounds way thicker than this guitar does, for example. So what I was just saying about Nags, a DGT is probably the closest thing to a Nags tone from a PRS, if that makes sense, because it's super thick. But I love the way that the pickups sound when you split them. They sound really very much like a Fender. And that was very much the goal. So it's kind of the benchmark between a Les Paul and a Tele or a Strat. But it doesn't really sound like a 335, in my opinion. It doesn't have that open airiness. It's got that really nice, snarly, you know, Billy Gibbons, Les Paul-esque type tone, but it doesn't have the open airiness of a 335. That's my take on it anyway. You know, I'd go to something like a McCarty if you want something more open sounding over a DGT. Which leads me on to the next question, which I'll answer for now, which is great. Hi Jack, favourite PRS model that you would like to own? I've had this question before. People have said to me, why don't you own a PRS? Because they seem to suit you really well, and I kind of tend to agree. I think that they do sound great. All those qualities I've described before about them being really bright and really articulate and responsive are all things that I like. If I had to pick one, it's really hard. This makes a very good contender because of how versatile it is. It's got the narrow field 408 style pickups, which I really like. It's got the middle pickup here, which I really like. It's got the tremolo, which I really like. It's got the chunkier neck, which I really like. However, part of me always goes back to a 594 as a benchmark for a PRS guitar. So, if this was on the wall right next to a 594, the perfect 594, I'd have a real hard time choosing between those two, but it probably comes down to either of those. It's a really good question, and it's, believe me, it's one I've asked myself many times. You know, there will definitely be a PRS on the horizon, I'm sure, but I'm not entirely sure what it's going to be. But stay tuned for that, and stay tuned to my own channel for that as well. Nice little plug, just to see if anything appears at some point. Okay, right, I'm going to leave it there for now. There are other questions coming in, which I will attempt to get to at the end, but I want to talk about one last pedal. I talked about the weird stuff. Now here's something that's just plain good. What that is the new FOD from MXR. I can only imagine what it might stand for. Some might say it stands for something quite rude, but I'm not sure. FOD, it basically sounds like a cranked amp in a pedal, and that's, of course, I can't pretend that hasn't been done before, but the way MXR make their pedals, I just love, because they just give you everything you need and nothing more. And what I like about this one is, as well as the regular volume, gain and tone, you also get a blend control, so you can add in the clean signal if you want to do that. And you've got a little 3-position switch, which gives you either a flat response, a mid boosted response, which is what I'm using right now, or a mid scooped response. So let's try the mid scooped. Again, I apologize that this might not translate that well over the camera, but here's the mid scoop setting. That's super easy to play, but it doesn't suit this particular amp that well. But that's what I like about it. Whatever amp you plug into, you just flick a switch and, you know, you'll find the sound that works the best. Here's the flat setting. And lastly, back to the mid-hump setting. I like all of them. So there's a few really good options in terms of tone there. And it's red sparkle finish, which is wonderful. Red sparkle finish guitar right here as well. So if you're feeling up to it, pick yourself up one of these new pedals and pick yourself up a matching guitar. That's the correct thing to do. So those are the 3 pedals I wanted to talk about today. Let me just quickly turn all of them on and see what sounds I can muster with a bit of gain. Feel like I'm at an American sporting event. Not sure why, but that's a pretty cool sound that I wouldn't have expected to get. It's pure 70s as well. It's like proper 70s lead sound. Pretty cool, man. Pretty cool. Right, let me zip through a few more questions just to make sure I don't miss anything before it's almost 5 o'clock already. Almost time to sign off. But thanks everyone for sticking with me. Thanks for staying the course of this video. It's been fun. Somebody asked about what Zevex pedal I was using, which you'll have just heard again. It was the Vibraphase. Really good, can't recommend it enough if you want sort of a weird modulation kind of a thing. Okay. Bevan Scott, are there any PRS guitars with narrow necks? All the ones I've played are wide. I can see what you mean actually, yeah, because they tend to have a wider nut width, I think, and the patterned thin necks, obviously because they're thinner, they feel just subconsciously they feel wider perhaps, but I don't really find that to be the case with the slightly larger neck profiles like this. This is a pattern regular, which feels a little bit wider than, you know, a Gibson, for example, but it's comfortable and it feels balanced. So perhaps you've played more of the pattern thin necks, but if you try a pattern regular or a pattern vintage, like what's on the McCarty 594, you might find that that feels more natural because it feels more balanced. That's what I think anyway. Let's see, a couple more. Do you think the Tom Murphy guitars feel and sound better due to having less finish, like a Relic or a thin skin master built Fender? That's probably a big part of it. I mean, the last time I played a Tom Murphy guitar was a long time ago, so I don't remember what that was like. But this one really stood out as just sounding great. It had loads of sustain. I think anytime you take less finish off a guitar, anytime you have less finish on a guitar, you take more away from it, the more open and more sustaining and stuff it's going to sound. So that minimal difference might make the tonal difference that you're describing, but I also think maybe, I'm trying to think if it was a bit lighter. I'm not sure. I guess they just pick really good tone woods as well. You know, Tom Murphy is going to pick some of the best tone woods that he can find to be more balanced, and seems Gibson are going in the direction which I really like at the moment, which is to make brighter sounding guitars, which they haven't done for a long time, but the recent reissue guitars have a lot of high-end content, which is great. So I guess that's what he was going for, and he just found a really good example of that in terms of the tone woods as well. So that's what I think. Paul Higgins says, did you ever try Duesenberg with lighter gauge 9s instead of regular 10s? I haven't actually, but that probably worked quite well, because I found that Duesenberg guitars often feel a little bit stiff to play, and that makes them great for some things. It makes them great rhythmically, because you can really just lay into the guitar and the strings sort of feel like they're more supportive. But to have 9s on it, that'd be a really interesting experience, particularly with that middle position with the out phase sound. I love the sound of a Duesenberg guitar, so I'd be interested to try it with 9s. I think it would really change the guitar quite a bit. But no, I haven't tried one, I'm afraid. Eric asks, have you played the Fender Strat Player Series, the made in Mexico guitars? I have indeed. Really nice guitars. They basically replaced the Mexican standard guitars. John and I filmed a video on those, about 2 years ago, a long time ago, right back at the start of my Peach Guitars days, and we covered all the models in the Player Series range. So check that out if you haven't seen it already. Though there will be some more Fender products featured in future videos in terms of the saloon stock that I talked about earlier, so keep your eye out for some more Fender Player Series and Vinteras and stuff like that coming up very soon. Okay, let's get a couple more questions in before I sign off. Relic Sun says, hi Jack, how are those Santana models? Are they any good? I haven't played a PRS Santana for ages. We haven't had one for quite a while. From what I remember, they kind of feel a little bit like an SG, which I really like. But I haven't played one recently enough to remember exactly what it sounds and feels like, but they're great. You know, they're part of the core collection of PRS guitars. Okay, let's see. I think we're about there. Right, I appreciate anyone who's asked a question and I haven't answered it. Forgive me that. I try my best to zip through as many as I can and play and talk about cool gear as well. So, you know, hopefully we've achieved all those things. But if I haven't answered your question, then please leave it in the comments down below, because this video will be staying live, as I think someone just asked. So yeah, if you've got any questions I haven't answered, drop them in the comments or save them for next week. Next Wednesday we'll be doing another one of these. I hope you've enjoyed it. This has been quite a fun one, as usual. I appreciate everyone for joining, as you typically do. It's great to have continuing support for these things. They're a lot of fun to do. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, if you want to check out more of my own stuff and sort of my own thoughts on not so much gear, but more sort of just talking about playing and music and stuff like that in general, you can find that on my own channel, which is Jack Griffiths Music. That will be linked in the description below. So I think that's about it for another Wednesday. It will be no time at all until I'm seeing you again, I'm sure. Stay tuned to the Peach Guitars channel because there's going to be some really good stuff coming out over the next few days and weeks. I can promise you that. Some really good stuff. So thanks for joining me for another live Q&A. I'm going to play you out with a few of these cool tones. Take care of yourselves and I'll see you soon. Thank you.